What's up, guys? Thanks for everyone who's been watching my stream. It's really motivating for me, and I'm excited to be back at my place and doing my thing. Um, so yeah, today I wanna talk over something that I think is it's really basic, but it's really. Oh shit! I'm getting some echo here. Stream. Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. Yeah, so it's really basic. It's something that's overlooked by a lot of people, I think, but it's really the foundation of the game. And I've got something really ridiculous to illustrate this, uh, but it might give you some ideas. So, I mean, there's a lot of units on the Dark Elf roster, on any roster that you have access to, and the question is where do you want to deploy it? And I'm gonna try and talk over what I think is like an optimal deployment using the example of MP Crossroads, because it's a big map and there's not too much terrain and other stuff to kind of complicate the discussion. I'm going to focus on the Dark Elves, but obviously, like the same principles can apply to a lot of different armies. And this is kind of like a what I would consider to be like a cheat book of how you can get your army to perform optimally, assuming you're able to micro everything well and assuming you're not, just memeing out on skirmishers and individual entities for interrupts, which is a viable play style. It's just nobody likes that. So yeah. Um, so here we go. What do I think is an optimal deployment? I'm going to go through where I think all of the units should be positioned, and we're gonna discuss. Maybe you disagree with me, maybe you have other opinions, but here's what generally works for me. So first and foremost, you want to secure the flanks, right? Because usually, if you win the flanks, you can wrap around your army, you can envelop your opponent, and you can win the fight. Now, what people normally do are like, okay, well, we're gonna put all of our cavalry on the flanks, and that's great. It's great to put your cavalry on the flanks, but well, depending on the army. But if you don't support your cavalry with spears, they're gonna they're gonna find your opponent's cavalry on the other flank, right? When they push out, because your opponent's gonna do the same thing. They're gonna put their cavalry on the flank, uh, so they're gonna meet each other. And if your opponent has spears and you don't have spears, then you're gonna lose that flank. So first and foremost, drop your cav on the flanks, and you want to drop spears to support them, and you want to lead with the spears so they take the shots, and then you countercharge with your cavalry. So okay, so that's we're off to a good start. Now, now this distance is really fucking huge, but just bear with me here. So now what I'm going to emphasize is I think the next thing you want to do is you want to sort of set up like the magical pizza. That's what I'm going to call like 90% of my deployment strategies. And the idea of this is it's basically like a giant slice of pizza, like this, and it's forming a triangle. I could say the magical triangle, but I like the magical pizza better, so that's what we're gonna go with. There's your crust up there. Yeah, let's get some pepperonis there. Oh, pepperonis got to be red. There we go, pepperonis. Yeah, so that's your pizza, and we got some pepperonis in there. So here's what's gonna make your 3 points of the pizza. So you got spearman unit on the flank, spearman unit on the flank, and then a spearman unit in reserve. Okay, great. So we're pizzaing it up. What do we need next? Well, lords are important. Let's go with the lord. Okay, so usually you want to keep your lord in the back line if it's on a large monstrous mount. I'm going to just use this as an example, and usually it's going to be wanting to be able to commit to wherever the help is needed, either the left flank or the right flank, and then debuffing and magicking and whatever it needs to do there. Um, Infantry. You're going to have probably your heavy infantry close to the center of the army, but you don't necessarily want it at the front of your army. What you want at the front of your army are your chaff infantry, like your bleak swords, things like that. They want to be anchoring the front of your army. Now I am deployed a little bit wide here. I'm exaggerating a little bit here, but uh, you want to take as much map control as the mobility of your army is going to allow you. So if you have a slow moving army, you're not going to be able to take up as much map control. If you have a fast moving army, you can afford to go a little bit more wide because you can help out stuff where it's needed. So okay, bleak swords in the front. Uh, I've got my dread spears. Again, I'm exaggerating a little bit. Dread spears are probably going to be closer to here. Um, you know what? Let me just pull these guys off to the side first. Like I'm going to put everything over in the corner, and we'll introduce things one at a time, because otherwise it's a lot to to see. Okay, so talked about this so far. You probably want to have your bolt thrower near that reserve unit, and these guys can be looking kind of back to protect them. And then the next thing you're going to want is some mid-range shooting. So for the Dark Elves, that would be your Dark Shards kind of here. And they can provide overwatch to your front line. Usually these are sort of like not modestly expensive troops that can shoot sort of over the shoulders of your frontline troops, and the purpose of them is basically to keep any large honest. So if there are trolls sitting in here, if there's a chariot, if there's other things, you want to put some pressure on them and not let that just like sit in your chaff troops, so you can deal with them with the Dark Shards. Okay, so let's say you're fighting vampires. Vampires fly over some caster or something. They drop some zombie summons on your Dark Shards. Well, you probably want something that can clear the zombie summons quickly. So for that, you can use something like Witch Elves. Witch Elves don't have armor. They're not meant to be used as a frontline troop in most cases. There are certain niches where you can get away with it, but mostly you want to keep them sort of in the midline, and their role will be to pin things. So if your Dark Shards get dived, or if they get hit by chaff like zombies or whatever, then your Witch Elves are going to run over and they're going to deal with that. So if you're Empire, right, I think a similar unit to the Witch Elves would be like the Flagellants. That would perform a similar role. If you're Wood Elves, then it's probably going to be your War Dancers, or maybe even your Dryads. Just stuff that can clear chaff very quickly, stuff that can keep your Dark Shards firing, basically, and stuff that's not super expensive. But usually the cost of that ability to clear stuff quickly is the light armor. So the Executioners already said that they would kind of be here. I mean, you can put the Executioners in front of the Witch Elves, and then the Witch Elves a little bit behind, because the Witch Elves don't have the armor. Another thing is okay. So chariots. I want to finish with the frontline infantry first. Okay, so Sisters of Slaughter. This is a unit that I had a lot of problems at first knowing where to deploy them, right? I used to deploy them like, okay, let's go on the flank because they're fast moving. And then I was like, okay, then I got my Corsairs. I put my Corsairs in here, and then I'll have my my slow moving infantry here, then my Corsairs, then my Sisters of Slaughter. And then the idea is that these guys will hit, these guys will flank, and then these guys will flank more. You can do that, but honestly, cavalry does that better. So I was like, well, what the hell's the point in the Sisters of Slaughter then? Like, I might as well just bring another unit of cavalry. So here's where I think you get the most value of the Sisters of Slaughter. It's with the use of their poison, because they have that poison ability, and they have pretty good foot speed. So you can use them to support your front line and sort of tip the balance. Like, Bleak Swords are going to lose against high tier infantry, but Bleak Swords supported by Sisters of Slaughter are going to give you a lot more value. So if there is something that's in trouble, you can send the Sisters of Slaughter here. The other thing is poison snares, right? So you can use the poison or the Witch Elves to pin any sort of large that come into that sacred zone where your Dark Shards are. Okay. Thanks for bearing with me. For the Black Ark Corsairs, maybe you want to deploy them on the flank. They don't have amazing foot speed, so you got to protect them a little bit, but probably about here is where you want them. You can alternatively slip them behind the Dark Shards, or sorry, behind the Dread Spears. That is an option. You can shoot over the Dread Spears, but again, you need some mass to pin them. For the Cold One Knights, actually, I know I put them on the flank there. They're okay there. Another option is to tuck them back a little bit farther in here. But you need something that can still respond to the Dread Spears if the Dread Spears get attacked. Okay, what about the Hydra? Where should I put the Hydra? Should I put the Hydra on the flank because then it's harder to shoot it, or should I put it in the middle of the board? Me personally, I think it's best in the middle of the board. Why is that? It has low leadership. If you put it in the middle of the board, if it flees, it's going to come back. If you put it on the flank, if it flees, there's a good chance it's going right off the map. It's never going to heal. It's never going to come back. So put it in the middle, let it soak the shots, and if other things come to fight it, then you have your supporting shooting that can deal with that, and plenty of other things that can react. So you want the Hydra sort of whatever can soak the most damage at the middle of your firing arc. Okay, moving on. Fire Sorcerers. Where should I put the Fire Sorcerers? Well, or any sorceress. I mean, I just grabbed one for example. Probably you want to put them in a unit of blackguard. Please forgive me if this is very elementary, but I think you'd be surprised how many players don't realize that it's a good idea to keep their foot lords complemented by a unit of high tier, well, or by a unit of infantry. You can also, if you want to go cheap, like against Beastmen, maybe you can get away with just Helabroni. Against other like high elves, you might want to go, like if you think you're going to have to deal with dragons, you might want to bring some Blackguard. Looks like I forgot to bring some Blackguard in this build, but basically they would go sort of where this one is. Another option, you could put this unit of Dread Spears up here, and then this one back here. Kind of up to you on how you want to do that one. I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference. What about the skirmish cavalry? Should you put the skirmish cav all the way in the back corner, or should you put them in the front of your army? There's different philosophies on this. Personally, I've been more and more in favor of putting them at the front of my army because they're very mobile, so you can use them if needed to go into melee, and you can pin stuff. Secondly, they don't cost a ton. If you're on top of your micro and you're kind of like going back and forth with them, they can screen a lot of shots for your other stuff in the back. A lot of people will choose to shoot at your skirmish cavalry, which means that your other expensive stuff like Harganeth Executioners and Sisters of Slaughter are not being shot, so that's usually a win. Okay, now what about chariots? Should we put chariots in the middle of an army? Should we put them on the side? In my opinion, chariots belong at the beginning of the game to be deployed on a flank. And why is that? Because you want to use your chariots like a pinball. What you don't want to do with your chariots, and what I see a lot of people do, is they dive the front line and they just keep going right on into the back line. And then once they get to the back line, there's going to be some unit of heavy cavalry or a noble or something, and it's just going to kill the chariot. And then they're going to be like, well, crap, I lost a shit ton of value and it did nothing for me. What you want to do, like you see Tomb King players, like the good Tomb King players are really good with chariots. You just want to pinball across the front lines, and you want to work your way from the left side until the right side, and just keep hitting back and forth. And then once you get to the far side, you come all the way back, and you keep doing that. So that's why I think it should start on the side and just keep going back and forth. The other reason is that makes it very hard for cavalry to pin you in place. Don't forget, you do have units of Dread Spears anchoring each of the sides. So if cavalry is chasing after your cold ones, or like, a duelist or something like that, it gives you the option to pull your chariots through your Dread Spears at each opportunity, and that's the pressure release for your Dread Spears. Okay, next up, we've got skirmish. We've got light cavalry. Where do you want to deploy that? Well, I think this is where you can afford to make some gambles. I mean, there is a philosophy that you can deploy it in the back. I mean, this is a bit niche to Dark Elves. I mean, other armies have different skirmish cavalry. So I'll talk through the Dark Elf one specifically. The Doomfire Warlocks, they have access to Soul Blight, which is an AoE support buff for your basically your army, right? It's going to affect a lot of units. So I think if you're going to go with the regular Doomfire Warlocks, you probably want to deploy it with your main army. On the other hand, the Slanesh Harvesters are better at dealing with individual entities, or like elite anti-large cav units like Demigryph Knights, because they have the Word of Pain. They also have Soul Stealer. So I think this unit is the type of unit that is better suited for Vanguard, because often when people see a Vanguard, they're going to send like a hero or a unit of cavalry to deal with it because it's the fastest. And if they do that, and you have an anti-large option for an individual entity, then it gives you options. So the other thing is, okay, well, where should I put my shades? If you have 1 or 2 shades, I think it's good to put in the Vanguard. If you've got like 5 or 6 shades, it's better with your main army, because if your Vanguard gets detected, you lose all those shades. It's very expensive. I would deploy your Slanesh Harvesters kind of in the midline between the shades. You can use them to pin and debuff whichever shade unit gets pinned. I would also consider using a unit of Dark Riders for interrupts. Likewise, you might want to mix in a unit of Dark Riders here. I know it's a little bit silly because you're never going to have access to this much fonts, but this is just a hypothetical situation. I'm trying to illustrate like where you could deploy all of your heroes. Death Hag. Should Death Hag be on the flanks or in the middle of the army? 100% you want her in the middle of your army, debuffing things, snaring things. Basically, you want to tar pit anything that comes into this sacred zone here. Whether she's on the Cauldron of Blood or whether she's on foot, she's going to serve more or less the same role. And then the Corsairs, they combo pretty well with spears. You can put them over here with the spears. So if people send chaff to deal with the dread spears, like Chaos Marauders and things like that, I mean, you have an answer to that right away with the Blackheart Corsairs. You just cycle them through. If you want, you can also just like piece them around the sides if the dread spears get caught up fighting other things. Okay, and finally, let's talk about the assassins, because I think they're a little bit confusing. Do you put them in your main unit? Do you put them with your other army? I think there's 3 ways you can do it, and I think which one you choose is situational. I'm going to start with like the classic way to deploy an assassin. So the way you can do it is you find a hero that looks really wimpy and like they're just going to die, and then you basically keep the assassin nearby. So maybe it's Marathi on foot, I don't know, whatever it is, and or a Dark Elf Sorceress on foot with a Spirit Leech. You keep the assassin nearby. If that gets attacked, you counter attack with the assassin. Another way you can do it is the assassins now have access to Vanguard. You can put them here, and it gives you an answer again to individual entities, and it also gives you something to disrupt charges. So if let's say someone sends a unit of cavalry after you, you can sometimes catch people off guard by sending in your assassin first, interrupting the cav charge, and then counter charging with other things. If they choose to fight the assassin here, then I have 2 units of shades that can shoot in on them. And if they choose to ignore the assassin, what I can pop is this Web of Shadows, which is a nice snare that can again buy more time for my shades to shoot and allow these cavalry to do some things. Now, one other thing is you might want to consider the use of harpies. There's two ways that I think they can be very effective. One is to support your Vanguard, because it gives you an answer. Well, it gives you mobility. It gives you an answer to, like, let's say spear screens. Maybe I wouldn't want to shoot into spears with my shades or charge into spears with my cavalry, so harpies give me that answer. The other thing I can do is I can use them to protect my bolt thrower or protect my dark shards. So against undead in particular, it's very often that you're going to see an undead player bring carrion or fell bats, and they're going to look to disable your shooting with the carrion or fell bats. If you have 1 unit of harpies to act as a backline anchor to respond to the fell bats or carrion, then that can net you a lot of value. They can also serve as a bodyguard for your lord, along with manticores, which I didn't bring, but that's pretty much the basics, I think, of an effective army deployment. And if you learn nothing from this video, all I hope that you remember is just pizza, because worst comes to worst, you're gonna have a good day with a nice slice of pizza. So enjoy. Take care. Bye.